Next up is the story of Lassa. How came about the name Lassa, naming of the disease after a town in Borno State. Lassa is a town in Borno State in northeastern Nigeria, and the first victim of Lassa Fever was working in Lassa town. And the disease, following the pattern of the time, in 1969 was named Lassa Fever. So there is someone who is from Lassa town, and he wrote an article that was archived in the Nigeria Health Watch 8 years ago. So it's an interesting article with an interesting perspective on the disease and the name. The article, written by Ibrahim Mamadu, MD, NPH. So it's titled How Lassa, in quotation marks, a small Nigerian town was stigmatized by having a killer virus named after it. So he wrote, viruses have always been part of my life story. My hometown has a virus named after it, Lassa. The story started with a missionary nurse, Miss Laura Wine, hosted by the Church of the Brethren in the USA, to the local hospital in Lassa town in the south of what is now Borno State in 1969. She had retired from a nursing career in Chicago, and in Lassa became the head of obstetrics at the Lassa Mission Hospital. She went home to the USA on leave, but on return to her station in Lassa, she started having a troublesome fever which just wouldn't go away. My father's cousin, Hamidu Gadzama, was the attending nurse in the hospital who managed her illness. He treated her with the conventional treatment for fever, assuming that it was probably malaria. She did not respond, and he started to suspect that this was no ordinary fever. He quickly radioed the missionary headquarters in Jos to explain the situation. He was asked to prepare her for travel, while an airplane was sent to pick her up at Mobi Airstrip and take her to Jos in the middle belt of Nigeria. In Jos, she was then transported to Sim Ekwa Evangelist Hospital, Jan, Kano, presently Ibrahim University Teaching Hospital. You remember Ibrahim University Teaching Hospital? It's the hospital where Dr. Salome Oboyi, the senior registrar in obstetrics, where she died recently. This Ibrahim University Teaching Hospital was formerly known as Sim Ekwa Evangelist Hospital. And at that hospital, that was where Miss Laura Wine, the first nurse known to have the disease, that was where she was treated in 1969. So the story continues. A much bigger and better equipped health center where she could get better medical attention. She did not improve, rather her symptoms worsened. Samples had been taken and sent to the laboratory and also to the United States where she came from. Her travel history revealed she had traveled through another West African country, probably Sierra Leone, came to Nigeria via Lagos, and had a stopover in Jos on her way to Borno State. She did not recover and eventually died. It was soon clear that they were dealing with an illness they had never encountered before. This new contagion was obviously highly transmissible and virulent, as not long after, the doctor and nurse that treated her in Jos also fell ill and died. Results from the USA Center for Disease Control (CDC) indicated this was a previously unknown arenavirus. The virus was named Lassa Fever, after my hometown, where it was believed she must have acquired the infection. However, my uncle who treated her initially did not fall ill from the disease. He died at a ripe old age, and very few cases of the infection have been reported in the village and state since then, which is true. After those cases in 1969, for about 48 years, there was no new case of Lassa fever in Borno State until 2017, when some cases were confirmed. And the report that carried it stated in 2017 stated that for 48 years there have not been cases of Lassa fever. So the fact that there have been few cases of the infection reported from the town, and from the state, adds credit to the point that Ibrahim is making here, that it is likely that Laura Wine got the infection from elsewhere. So let's go on. My father, Professor Emeritus Njidda Mamadu Gadzama, OFRO FAS, now of University of Maiduguri. This was written 8 years ago, remember? Now of University of Maiduguri, was during his undergraduate and postgraduate training in the United States at the time, was doing his undergraduate or postgraduate training in the United States at the time, and had heard that the new virus was named after our own hometown. He thought that this was very unfair. On returning to Nigeria, he decided to do something about it and interviewed several virology experts at the University College Ibadan, University College Hospital in Ibadan, Nigeria's foremost medical school, to explore if there was any evidence from their research that the virus originated in Lassa. The experts indicated that it was unlikely that the virus had originated there. My father wrote an article published in the now defunct New Nigerian newspaper, which was an extremely widely read newspaper at the time. He listed reasons why naming the virus after our town and Nigeria was a mistake. He argued that the most logical thing to do was to name it after the doctor that had managed the index case, Dr. Cassels, or after Miss Wine. His argument was that the nomenclature would be stigmatizing to the village and the country. The head minister at the time, Mallam Aminu Kano, read this article and agreed that something needed to be done to change this name. The country had just come out of a civil war, and they didn't want any other negative story which should prevent foreigners from visiting the country. He quickly sent a ticket to my father to come down to Lagos, the nation's capital at the time, and brief him on what could be done. In Lagos, following his discussion with the minister, they agreed that the best line of action would be for the minister to prepare and take this argument to the next World Health Assembly of the World Health Organization, which is the annual meeting of all health ministers of member states. The minister argued the case for Nigeria at the assembly vigorously, but in the end it was unsuccessful. It was clear that once an organism is named in the scientific literature, It's very difficult to change that name. However, a positive outcome from the argument to rename the virus was that the assembly agreed that it is stigmatizing to name infectious agents after locations like Ebola in the then Zaire or West Nile, and resolved that the practice would be discouraged. My village, Lassa, however, suffered immensely from this stigma. For instance, doctors started refusing postings there. Visitors stopped coming, and even missionaries were not as keen to work there. The town's hospital, which patients used to visit from northern Cameroon and even as far off as Central African Republic, due to the fame of the specialist missionary doctors that were previously there, became a shadow of itself. Today, as a doctor, epidemiologist, working with the World Health Organization, supporting Nigeria, and also pursuing viruses like monkeypox, polio, and yellow fever, I look back at my town and country and ask myself critically, what has changed the country's ability to prevent, detect, and respond to outbreaks since those days in the 60s and 70s? Well, quite a lot. We have grown exponentially in population, and I've seen several initiatives to improve the health sector, notably the Ama Ata Declaration, the Abuja Declaration, Professor Olikoye Ransome-Kuti's drive to invigorate primary health in the 80s, the signing into law of the National Health Act, to name a few. Then it went on to talk about the NCDC, more recently the National Center for Disease Control. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control was created to coordinate the nation's surveillance and response to all outbreaks. The NCDC performed well in its first major challenge in 2014 when the threat of the West African Ebola landed on Nigeria's shores. In 2017, it was at the forefront of the response to a major outbreak of cerebrospinal meningitis in Nigeria that at the end had 14,473 suspected cases and 1,155 deaths. It has subsequently responded to several other outbreaks like yellow fever, cholera, hepatitis E, and yes, indeed, our own Lassa Fever. Then we talked about some of the things that the NCDC do. So this is an article written by Dr. Ibrahim Mamadu, MD, MPH, who at the time was working with the World Health Organization. How Lassa, a small Nigerian town, was stigmatized by having a killer virus named after it. So the good thing that the WHO has changed the practice of naming diseases after cities, towns, and countries where disease was first discovered, because history has shown that the place where the disease was first discovered may not be the place where it originated. It's possible that someone can get the disease somewhere and transport to some other place, and when the person is diagnosed at the new place, you could think that the new place is the place of origin, whereas the disease has arisen from somewhere else. And so the practice has changed thanks to the efforts of the father of Ibrahim Mamadu, let's see the name, Professor Emeritus Njidda Prof Gadzama of the University of Maiduguri. Thanks to the effort of Professor Gadzama and the efforts of Kano, who was the Minister of Health at the time, Mallam Aminu Kano, and the presentations he made at the World Health Assembly of the World Health Organization, that make them to discourage the naming of places where diseases were first discovered. I'll see the impact that naming Lassa town, naming the virus after Lassa town had a negative impact on that town. A once thriving hospital, doctors, people stopped volunteering to work there, and the hospital, which once served parts of the northeast and other neighboring African countries like Cameroon and Central African Republic, that once booming, once thriving hospital now became a shadow of itself, or because of this name. So it's important to note this history. It's important to underscore what is being said here. That it's likely that Laura Wine, the first in this case, likely she got the disease from somewhere else, because it's been reported that for 48 years after those first cases, Lassa town and Borno State did not have Lassa fever cases for 48 years until 2017, which lent credence to this write-up, that it was wrong to name Lassa after the town because of the strong possibility that Miss Laura Wine would have gotten the disease somewhere. In the same vein, we want to salute the work of Miss Laura Wine, who retired from nursing practice in Chicago and volunteered to come to Nigeria to work in Nigeria as a missionary nurse, headed the obstetrics department in that hospital in Lassa town. The humanitarian effort, the volunteering spirit, the willingness to travel many miles away, thousands of miles away from home, to work in Nigeria. And sadly, at a point, she got Lassa fever. So Miss Laura Wine and other health, the doctor who contracted it, the white treating Dr. Castles, and other nurse who got it, you have to salute their courage. These are people who volunteered to come work in Nigeria, who were working in Nigeria, and unfortunately, like soldiers in battle, they succumbed to the illness they were fighting. So we must salute Laura Wine, we must salute Dr. Castles and other people who have died as a result of Lassa fever and other infectious disease, not only in Nigeria, not only in West Africa, but in other parts of the world. We must salute them. We must praise and remember the volunteering spirit of these individuals and how they stood tall and how they faced, they fought against diseases, and they were heroes and giants who died in the course of the battle against diseases. So you should honor their name, you should remember them. Even as we talk about the naming, you should honor these individuals for their sacrifices and all that they've done.